Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Today is May 26th. I can't believe it. Feels like time is flying this year. My name is Jason Ketter. If you're tuning in, I've got my best bud, Oliver Catt, in the house. Oliver, what's new? What's going on?
Yeah, no, I'm all good, Jason. Another episode, another week, ready to really kick it up and knock it into overdrive with episode number 3. But living the dream, I'm ready to rock and roll. How are you?
I am great. Always fun stuff going on in my world. Always interesting. Sometimes it's air quotes interesting, where it's not interesting, but it's just a nice way to put it. But always good stuff. And for people tuning in, or if you're watching the replay, appreciate it. Welcome to Call Center Confidence with Cutter and Catt. That's the brainchild of Mr. Oliver Catt, coming up with the alliteration there. I think that's what it is. I was more of a math and science guy. We weren't here last week, so I was traveling. Oliver was dealing with some personal stuff and or moving and or things. So we decided to hold off for all of our fans. It means you missed us last week, but here we are. Please, if you're tuning in now or wherever you're coming in, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, leave a comment, say hello. Tell us that you're watching, maybe where you're watching from. And, obviously this is very interactive. So if you have any questions as we dive through this, we would love to hear from you, anybody out there. So, so the first 2 episodes, Oliver, we were talking about leadership, right? So one of the biggest topics is the leadership side. There's many different ways to go. As the leader goes, so go the staff. The fish stinks from the head down. Several different ways you can put it relative to the impact that leadership has relative to the organization and its effectiveness, which is why we decided to start there. And we're going to mix it up a little bit this week and go a completely different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we hit 2 really cracking episodes on leadership, especially within the call center industry. But you've also got to remember that I know we're talking about call center confidence. There's a wide range of industries that work with that leadership tools, and there's going to be a lot of things that have a crossover that we're going to talk about in all of the upcoming episodes. But today we're going to really kick it into overdrive as we talk about the whole onboarding process. We were talking yesterday about where we're going to take today's episode. We were talking about training. We were talking about getting your teams ready, the speed to competency, and getting them in place. But when you really take it back, when you go right back to the beginning, where does it start? And it restarts with your recruitment. And that's the first and foremost that we need to look at. And that's what we're going to pick up on today. We're going to look at the recruitment strategies, the tactics that you can implement, and plug some of those gaps that you currently have. Jason and I have been talking with many different clients over the past couple of weeks who have all come to us with gaps, should I say, in areas of how do we hire the right people? How do we bring the right people on board at the right time? How do we give them the tools and equipment to do their job from day one? And that starts right from day one when we start advertising, when we start thinking about our recruitment strategy. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump straight into getting the right people on the bus, the right people in the job from day one. So Jason, when we're talking from a sales community, when we're talking about the call center industry, what type of people are we looking for? Before we even advertise, what do we need to be thinking about?
Well, and I think what's interesting is it depends, which is also my sales answer and always the answer if you're in a consultative sales role. Really, the key is there's so many different personality types and behavior types. Obviously, there's DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, there's all kinds of assessments. There's various ones you could use to determine. Really, the key is, and then of course, there's just different industries, different types of people. The key that it comes down to is what is the best for your organization? How do you figure out who the right person is and what makes the most sense? Who are you looking for? I mean, there's a couple of buckets. There's the personality and behavior side that you want, that you think is a good fit generally, somebody who performs well. Generally, there's always outliers. And then, of course, you have the experience bucket, which is how much experience do you need or want somebody to have? Do you need someone who's a sales pro, but will most likely be completely inflexible in anything you ask them to do different than what they want to do? Or do you want somebody who's green and a blank canvas who's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort to nurture them? And so there's that side. But I think really the key is, and the biggest suggestion I have, which we're going to throw out a bunch of ideas here, so hopefully this resonates with people, but is to really start by reverse engineering what you have now that's working and who is it that you're looking for.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point and a really good place to start, because you look at what's good, what's working. You know, we always say the classic saying, you know, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But you know,
Right.
we kind of need to look at that in a sense of the people that we bring on board. Having worked with many companies in the past where, you know, some people just want bums on seats for the sake of putting people in there. You know, we've got to recruit 20 people this round. Let's throw 20 people in. Versus the other people that say, okay, great, we need 20 people to go live. Let's do a group of 30, and then we'll cull 10 throughout the induction process. And for me, in those instances, most of those companies look for people that have the right traits, the right qualities. And that's really what it's all about, because you can train product, you can train the skills to be able to do what they need to do. But can you train characteristics? Can you train personalities? And for me, that's the first and foremost. That's what I would look about. Who is great? What type of personalities do we have on the team? What type of characteristics? What kind of values do we have? One of my CEOs that I worked for many years ago always said a great saying that I believe he got from somewhere else. And I believe it kind of goes back to kind of Jack Welch back in the day. And it was, great companies are built on great people. And that is a slogan that I live and die by, because I think that's so important when you're recruiting in the call center environment, because we all know call center agents, call center managers, team leaders, VPs, sales ops, whatever it might be, their tenure within the business can be long or can be short, depending on their career growth. You know, a lot of people will come into a call center and churn within 6 to 18 months. So you're constantly spending money in the background. It's some of those hidden costs, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. But those costs disappear very quickly when you start churning staff. So how do we look for those great people? What do we need to look for? I mean, your opinion, Jason, what's a great characteristic to have in a call center, let's go with the sales environment to start with. You know, we need to be specific, because sales and customer service are two very unique areas, two very separate areas. And some companies try to kind of work with both, and some companies have to work with both, because unfortunately they don't have the pool of candidates wherever they need them. So you've got to adapt with the times. But what would you look for from a sales environment to get the right people through the door?
I mean, the personnel, or the traits, the behaviors more than personalities that I always look for is openness and willingness, right? So it's an openness for new information, for ideas, for feedback. Nothing more challenging than somebody with a closed mind trying to get them to do a sales process in a certain way that you know works, or in even giving them feedback to tweak, right? So everyone's going to have a different style. You're not trying to make a team full of robots, but you need someone who's open and willing to take in new information and wants to be successful. That person who's always learning and always seeking ways to improve. That's the person, in my opinion, that's on their path to being a professional. And a professional doesn't ever assume they've arrived, and they're not happy just getting to a certain point and plateauing. They always want to grow. They're always learning. They're always a student of something. That's what I look for. And what's interesting too is AJ put a comment in here. He said, very wise person once told me, hire for traits, things you cannot train. I had a friend a long time ago, for his office, what he used to say, his mantra was, hire the smile, train the skill. It's tough to get someone to change their attitude and behavior. And if they're going to fit, you can teach skills. If someone has the right attitude and they're open to it, that's why I lead with openness versus anything else. I mean, persuasive, persistent, creative, confident, all those things are great. But if they're not open, then they're just going to get stuck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that. I love all of those kind of different analogies to make sure that we get the right people through the door, because we need that. You know, if you put it on a scale of kind of values going one way by characteristics and kind of performance going the other way, is, you know, performance can be trained, values can't. And you know, you're born with that, you're bred with that. It's you know, it's your upbringing. To the age of 18, your characteristics are being built, and then all of a sudden it becomes habit, it becomes who you are. So I completely agree with that, and I back that up 110%. Again, you know, looking at some of the different areas, and I know, you know, people that will be watching this or listening to this post live will be saying, you know, we don't always get the time or the benefit to kind of plan this out ahead of time. There's another thing you need to be thinking of or be wary of, that, you know, if you don't have the time to recruit. Call center environments are very fast paced. They're very quick off the mark. And, you could get a phone call from the higher ups today and say, hey, start recruiting now for 20 people next week. Let's bring them in. You're not going to have the time, or necessarily people are going to have the notice periods to get the right characteristics across. So you've got to be open-minded when it comes to that. So again, I say this with a massive pinch of salt. Don't be afraid to push back and say you need a little bit more time. But coming from a call center industry, they'll be like, I don't worry about time. Bums on seats next week. You've got to be wary of that. And I think that's something that's going to come up a lot. And I know people are probably screaming at going, yeah, but I get this all the time. It happens. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that you brought that up. I mean, I think that's why, in all the stuff I've done, even my previous podcast, I said everything in life is sales. And that includes selling in the organization, not just selling to clients, customers, consumers. It's selling the team, persuading them on your ideas or to change or new initiatives. But it's also about persuading, selling up the chain as well, if you need to. I know that for me, that's one area I've been really successful at, which is managing my manager, which is usually the CEO, when they have something they want to get done, and then coming back to them with data, facts, figures, not just blindly, emotionally, like a lot of sales leaders do or sales managers do, where they just want to persuade and sell because they don't want to do something, but saying like, here's why we need more time. I need to build this recruiting right. I know you want to fill seats, but we have this terrible, horrific turnover. And the reason why is because we're pouring water into a bucket that has a hole in the bottom, and we need to plug that hole first. So give me another week. Here's what I'm going to do. And so it's having that confidence to be able to have those conversations.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, as well, the more and more we see this, it happens every single day. It happens in all the different sites and the centers, looking to one of my most recent experiences where you do back-to-back recruitment. You're going to kill your talent pool very quickly if you're constantly recruiting. Your demographic only goes so far. Your reach only goes so far. You can't expect somebody to travel 2, 3, 4 hours to work just because you want that kind of person working for you in your office. So, yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think, it all boils down to making sure we get the right people through the right door at the right time. And as you say, having the confidence to have those crucial conversations. But we also need to make sure that we set them up right. We need to be looking for the right kind of talent pool, the right job descriptions. I think job descriptions play a key part in who we hire as well and who we bring on board, because job descriptions have to be very detailed. They have to be very broad enough to kind of encompass a lot of areas, but also very specific to make sure that we kind of attract the right candidate. I've seen job descriptions that are half a page. I've seen job descriptions that are 4 pages long. Where do you think, Jason, that a job description should sit in terms of length and information that's required?
Oh man, I was going to ask you that question, so I didn't have to answer. It really depends. So I've tested, and we're talking about HR really gets mad when people like you and I throw around this term job description, when sometimes we mean job post or advertisement for a job versus job description, which is you're going to do these detailed things. So for some people listening, you might be using different terms. So which are you referring to, Oliver, like in this conversation?
Yeah, no. For me, I think from a job description, it's what's attracting, your client pool. So we're talking about the adverts that go out on LinkedIn, on Indeed, CV Library, all of these different web portals, online, going back in the day, newspapers, internet, websites. Yeah. And even recently, I've been looking at a couple of company websites for some people, and there are, we're hiring, we're recruiting, and you've just got pages and pages and pages of information of the type of person they're looking for. Now, obviously, some of these companies are being far too specific, which actually turn a lot of people off. And you can actually turn some really good clients away, or really good, shall I say, potential candidates away from actually working for your company because you put too much in a job description. And I was guilty of that before, because I wanted to make sure when I was recruiting for my team, I covered all bases, who we were reporting into, what the structure of the business was, who's actually going to be doing X, Y, and Z, what your responsibilities are. Because I think it's also important that, a job description highlights the pros and essentially the cons, so that you are aware. Because again, I've been in situations where we brought the wrong people on board, or we brought the wrong person on board because we've kind of not been too elaborate, or maybe not given enough detail in a job description. And,
Yeah.
I think some people have been very disappointed when they've come on board and gone, well, you didn't tell me that when I started. So, for me, it's about getting it right.
I totally agree. So if we're looking at using the words job description, which I agree, it's the way I've always said it as well, being that advertisement, that job post, that way to attract people into the beginning of the recruiting process. I have tested both. I've tested the long form. I've tested the short form. With anybody who has experience applying for jobs, the short ones most of the time end up being or feeling a lot like get rich quick schemes. So where it's like, hey, make 100K in your first 9 minutes of working, call us to apply, right? And it's like, it seems good. This seems legit. Let me try it. And you apply to enough of those and you realize like it's not. But I've tested both sides, the long form. I think somewhere in the middle, I agree what you said, I think is the most important thing, which is setting the right expectations of what's there. And how do you do that in the right amount? It's also about attracting the right people. It's about who are you looking for? That's why the first thing we talked about and what I mentioned was reverse engineering who you have and how did they come on board? What do you like about them? Why are they a rock star in your organization, right? Why are they performing and deconstructing what that is? And then writing that job description, that job post relative to attracting that kind of person. Is it the kind of person who likes a longer post, who wants to read that and wants to get those details? Or is it somebody who likes the shorter one, that salesperson who just says, I don't need much training, just throw me in the seat and I'll just jump in there and start closing deals? Well, that person's not going to read a 3-page job description because they're, more on the impatient side for selling, which is fine. If that's who you want to attract, then don't write long form job descriptions to attract that kind of person. So it really depends on who you're looking for. And then what happens is I see organizations who get desperate and they want to fill seats. So they go the other way with their job descriptions. Then they follow through with recruiting and they end up getting those people on the bus, but ultimately they don't want those people on the bus because they're not going to work.
No, exactly. And, that's a point. There's no name attached to the comment that I'm looking at right now, but it says, quick recruiting results to higher attrition. And you're absolutely right, because, whether you're either giving them the truth, you're not telling them the whole truth about what to expect when they jump on board. I've seen sales companies put kind of service elements in their job description to get the right people on board, to get those bums on seats, to say, hey, look, I got 50 people on board this month. Great. Okay. But I'm churning X. I worked with a company many years ago in a marketing kind of arena, and I was training their team, and we wanted to kind of really equip a team to have a high head count. And I must have trained a couple hundred, maybe to 400, 500, 600 people over the space of 2 years. And that team never exceeded 50 people. And the reason for that is because, maybe their expectations were low. Maybe they were sold on the dream, as you say, come in and earn 100 grand within 9 minutes. Because I see so many of that out there when it comes to especially field marketing, whether it's over telesales, whether it's door to door, whatever it might be. You can have all of those people come through the door because they're attracted by the high salary and the quick wins. But there is no quick wins. There's no silver or magic bullet to make sure that you get that win in place. And that's one of the big things that comes off the back of that.
Yeah. And I think the key is that, again, setting the right expectation. So whatever is in your job post, making sure that it's valid, it's true, it's attainable, and it's going to get the right people and set the right expectation. I see a lot of times where there's a sales role that involves a lot of outbound calling, cold calling, and they don't mention that much. And so then people are shocked when they get into the role, or even when they show up for an interview and they find out the truth about it. And then it's a big turnoff, right?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's so many different factors. So I think really to sum up, from a JD and a job description standpoint, I think, it's important to remember, put in the information that is crucial to the role that you are filling. Do not overfill. Do not go into too much detail. And of course, don't sell the dream on too short a detail, because, as our LinkedIn user says, you're going to churn quickly, you're going to have a high attrition, and you're going to end up having to do it all over again. And again, that's another topic where we lose money that we don't physically see, our recruitment costs. And we will come on to kind of hidden kind of costs that we don't account for. Your trainer's time, your recruiter's time, your HR's time to file all the paperwork. All of this stuff you pay in salaries, you expect on a daily basis, but you're just wasting people's time because they're filing CVs, making phone calls, they're outbounding all of these different candidates, and you're just hemorrhaging cash. And nobody likes to hemorrhage cash, especially in the call center world where budgets are tight. But we'll come back to that a little bit later on.
And I think as we leave the job description topic aside, one of the big keys, and this is where I see a misalignment in some recruiting processes around this itself, is one person is writing this job description, this job post, right? This ad that's going out on Monster, Indeed, Craigslist, wherever it might be. And then there's other people doing the recruiting process. Maybe HR is doing some interviews or somebody else is doing it. And there's a misalignment between what somebody's reading about and then what's happening during the interview process. In the same way that I see a lot of organizations have a challenge with marketing is saying one thing, the prospective lead comes into the funnel via one message, then they get the sales who's saying a different thing. So you want to make sure that everything is coordinated. Everybody is talking about the same thing and focused on the same basically story of who they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, look at AJ's last comment that's just come up there. Before you create a candidate persona, I suggest you identify your targets and define your definition of success and wins. Absolutely. Without that end goal, without a target or a goal to go towards, you're just going around in circles. We all know that we have to set our goalposts in order to achieve that goal. If you're just kind of going in a roundabout way, you'll eventually get there in a roundabout way and waste everything along the journey. And nobody wants to do that. No. But then again, that also touches on a very good point. Is like, who's involved in your recruitment? Who is involved from a daily basis to your candidate screening, your CV screening? Do you have the right people doing the job that you need to bring these people on board? And again, I've worked with companies in the past where, you've got frontline sales managers who aren't really equipped to bring on a team member or a frontline sales rep. Now, I'm not saying that they can't do that, but they've not been trained in what to look for. I think, Jason, you've raised a really good point recently on this when we were kind of discussing it behind the scenes about, how we do this and go about this. And I think that's a relevant point for you to bring up.
Yeah. So the challenge that happens is everyone kind of has their focus and or their expectations and or their biases of what works or doesn't work. And so a lot of times organizations will say, hey, the sales manager should be the one interviewing, hiring, recruiting, or making those decisions. And they're going to be looking at it from their frame of mind of what works or doesn't work. And if not careful, what happens with a lot of organizations is they end up with a very homogenous sales team because that sales manager is just picking everybody who they think should fit, usually because, and if they're not careful, I think we talked about this before in the episode 2 about leadership, it's usually as a result of them just looking at what they did to be successful. So they just try to pick more people who are exactly like them. Not that that's the worst thing. It's just doesn't lead to any diversity. And, could lead the team down a solo path that's not going to be effective. And then on the flip side, you have if HR is doing recruiting or they're doing, the interview process, they're going to have a different perspective. Sometimes, and I'll just say it, it's the truth. You might not always want to hear it. HR has a more negative view of sales because HR is dealing with the complaints or the issues or the terminations, the turnover, like all these things, and they're just seeing what's happening, or they're hearing the back end processing or operations complaining about the salespeople, right? It just happens in every organization. And so HR is in the middle of it. And so HR has this feeling about sales, and then they're recruiting in a different way, trying to either mold or, not bring in the people who could work because of what they're hearing. And so it's really about making sure whoever's doing that recruiting fully understands what is being sought after, and everyone working together so that it's the right people being brought in for the organization. What do you think from that? perspective, Oliver? What have you seen?
I agree. I've seen people do it themselves. I've seen people bring in, the HR team, as you kind of mentioned. As AJ is saying right there, this will help identify who you need in those roles and what they may need to become successful in their roles to help contribute to your overall success. And I couldn't agree more. And I think there are a lot of different ways that you can do it. If your HR team or if your sales managers are close to that team, are close to the floor, are close to what they really need to deliver, then it can work. Mm-hmm. But when you work in a large business, and I've worked in call centers that have 10 people, I've worked for call centers that have thousands of people. Are your HR team close to what your team do? Do they understand the real needs of your team development and what you are looking for? Do they understand your specific team dynamic? Because that's another thing as well. It's like you need to look at, if you're recruiting for a team of, 3 or 4 people to fit within a team of 20 that fits within a team of 1,000, are they going to really know that existing team as it sits right now to understand the type of people that are going to fit in to that team, that are going to work with that team and get on? Personality clashes, conflicts going to arise. So there's so many different factors to kind of bring into this that you need to have somebody that's on the floor, boots on the ground, that can be involved in the entire process. Now, don't get me wrong, the higher up the chain you go through to your supervisors, your assistant managers, your call center managers, your ops, VPs, whatever, they're not always going to have the time they need to kind of get involved in the frontline recruitment that you have to do. But somebody who knows what they're looking for, somebody who knows the type of people that they want to bring in, they are the people that should be involved, not through the whole process, but maybe second stage or third stage, before we start to do the culling or the cutting people out, because they need to see the type of candidates they're getting through the door. And I think it's important that eyes are open for all areas of the business. What do you think?
I think that's super important. And one thing, as you're talking about it, I was thinking back to companies who did it successfully and then ones who really struggled. One of the big keys that they put in place, the successful ones, is always the metrics and the KPIs. I mean, that's always what it is, right? If you want to be successful, you have to have metrics, KPIs that are twofold. One is relative to what that individual can control, right? So if it's in sales, it's what can you control? You can control your activities. You can control some results, but usually activity-based. And then also bigger picture for the whole company, the whole organization, and for the whole life cycle. Where organizations have issues is they say, okay, marketing, your job is to get lots of leads. Go get lots of leads. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best leads. They're going for volume. Sales, get lots of sales. Doesn't mean it's going to be the right clients. Doesn't mean they're going to be compliant or ethical if you're not careful. When it comes to recruiting, the same thing happens, right? If you tell that manager, put butts in seats, just get lots of people, you're going to end up with a lot of turnover. You're not going to get quality. You're going to get quantity, and it's going to lead to issues. Same thing if you did that with HR. If you said, HR, fill seats. Okay, they're going to fill seats. You're not going to like the end result and the financial and morale cost to the organization. So I think the key is tying those some kind of metric to whoever's doing the recruiting for the turnover piece. But you've got to be careful, because turnover is also a result of training. It's of management, of leadership, things like that. So you have to be careful. But if you can put in some kind of metric, some kind of accountability, so that people want to put the right people in the right seats, then everyone is going to row the right direction.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I can't say that I've worked with too many companies that have those kind of metrics in place for that recruitment piece, but I think it's a great way to go, and it's a great way to look at it. Again, touching on another comment, further to evaluate your training and development team to see if they are currently capable of leveling people up and achieving optimal speed to competency. I couldn't have said that better myself, AJ. I think that's a great comment you've made there. And again, all of these metrics, and we're going to touch on training and development. Both of us being in a training and development background for many, many, many years, call center space. Look, we're itching to get to that topic, but we're going slowly. We're going to get there. I promise you. When we hit training and development, you will know about it, and those bells will be rung, especially when it comes to onboarding and induction training, because I know that's a hot topic for Jason and I. But at this stage, yes, you're absolutely right. Metrics need to be in place. They need to be there to make sure that we get the right candidates through as well. Because how many companies have you worked for where you've hired 20, 30 people And on day one, people don't even turn up. Why? Because, the HR team have failed to follow through, failed to confirm start dates, failed to give them the right information. And then companies have to go back to their talent pool to say, well, who did I like? Who did I not quite put through? They could have been put through, but, somebody else pipped them to the post. I think so many companies nowadays use marking and scorecards when you're going through the evaluation stage. And I think most call centers do this. I don't know how many do. I mean, I've seen some that just do a one-stage interview, bring in, thanks very much, good night, you're on board, you're hired. But at the same time, I've worked with people that do a very rigorous and very detailed onboarding process, which is a telephone interview, then a first stage, then a group interview where they bring everybody in, do interactions, role plays, and everything else. And then there's a second stage. I like companies that do that in one day because there's so much information to be gained and you meet so many people. Information goes in one ear and out the other. And I think from a metric standpoint, when you're marking these people, if you can hit it in one day and then follow through with your candidates all the way to success or failure, I think that's really important, especially if your other teams are involved or HR members are involved. I think that's key. And at the same time, and I know it's coming up shortly, but you need to be giving feedback to these people, why they've done well in this part of the interview, why they didn't do well in that part of the interview. And whether you do it there and then or after, people need to know what they did well and what they didn't. That's how do we improve? How do we get better at what we do if we don't know what we did wrong?
Yeah, I agree with you. We're on the same page with all this stuff. Anyone's tuning in for the first time, this is not a set up debate show where we got two people who view things opposite and we're just going to battle all the time. We mostly agree. We fundamentally agree, looking at it from different perspectives, which is why we decided to do this show, just to give, kind of two different views of things. I agree. I mean, the big thing, and here's how I always view both the recruiting process and the feedback, is I think the feedback is important. I think the recruiting process is important to structure it a certain way. For me, again, going back to something I said early on, everything in life is sales. And I view the recruiting process as sales and persuasion. You're trying to persuade somebody to come work for you. They're trying to persuade you that they're the right candidate. That feedback is the same thing. If you're in some kind of consultative sale, that means there's people who are a good fit as customers, and then there's people who are not a good fit as customers. And there's going to be people who you're going to say, I don't think I can help you. You're not a good fit for us, and here's why. Right? Now, if you're an organization where everyone wins, so any live body with a pulse that you talk to is going to be a client and you're going to push them in there, then that message isn't for you. But for everyone else who is like, there's a decision to make as a customer, then it's great. Same thing for recruiting. Not every person should be in your seats. If you're going in that mode, I promise you it will be a painful bucket with a hole in it. It's the same thing as companies who sell to every human out there and they try to just do that mode. And so there's going to be people, and then give that feedback. Look at it the same way. It's not a good fit. Here's why. Here's what we're looking for. I in many of my interviews I used to do, I turned into a career counselor. I'm like, I don't think this is gonna be a good fit. I usually tell people, I'm like, you're not gonna enjoy this. This is not what you want in life. Like, you're not gonna have fun here. For some people that I think they're gonna have fun, other people I'm like, no, this is not what you want. And here's what I suggest instead. And maybe check this out or go this path. And then I think the recruiting process needs to match or follow similar cadence and length of your sales process. I mean, if you do a short sales cycle, then yeah, your interview should be a shorter sale process. If you're doing B2B, long-term, long sales cycle, then you should have a longer recruiting process, because the kind of person you want is somebody who's patient, right? If you do a slam recruiting process into a long sales cycle sales process, you're going to bring in people who are expecting short term, and then you're like, okay, cool, it's going to take you 2 months to close a sale. They'll be like, no, I'm it's a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, and nobody wants that. Nobody likes that, and you are going to struggle, and you are going to battle with these people to make sure you get them in the right place. And that's not where you want to be. Not where you want to be at all. But the other thing we really need to look at is, we're talking about selling the dream. We're talking about, getting people involved, and that's all well and good being in a face-to-face environment. And, you bring people in. We talked about the group interviews, the first stage, you come into the office. Just to touch on very quickly, we live in an environment now where we are both on site or we are both remote. And we talked about this with leadership, about how we do virtual leadership. We've also got to talk about how we do virtual recruitment. There are so many companies out there at the moment that are doing this virtually and never actually meet their personnel face to face. It's all through Zoom interaction, LinkedIn lives, whatever it might be. Do we need to take something else into consideration while this is happening? I think this is something that people are asking at the moment. And I remember recently, I lie recently, probably about 6 months ago, I saw a post from a connection of mine on LinkedIn going, has anybody got any experience in recruiting and training virtually without actually bringing anybody into the office, giving everybody the equipment online, training them online, and letting them go online and sell our products? I provided some insights back in the day, but this was early days COVID or midway through COVID. So no one really knew what to expect. But we're kind of coming out of that now. Some people are going back to the office, but some people are choosing to stay remote. What would you suggest, Jason, when it comes to doing this virtually and remotely?
So for me, it's interesting because when I entered into sales a while ago, it was in person. I was helping people with mortgages. And when people would call in from a postcard or a letter, or it was a referral, I was instructed and taught, get them in the office as soon as possible so you can look them in the eye, build trust, build a relationship, and then also start collecting paperwork and ask questions. But that literally do not do anything over the phone. Get them in the office as quickly as possible. Don't try to do anything over the phone because you won't be able to compete, right? And then many years after that, I went to all phone sales. And I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think it was possible to sell people over the phone because I figured you had to be in person. That's just what you did. And then I learned that you can. And the reason I mention this is the same thing happens with this recruiting and with this training. For me, the same skills have to be learned when you're recruiting virtually. Like I learned, and anybody who goes from an in-person sales to telephone sales has to learn, which is picking up on cues, listening. If you have video, paying attention really closely to what's being said and what's not being said. And you have to pay attention and pick up on those things that we cheat when we're in person and can pick up on easier. So I use those same skills. For me, I listen and can hear that. And so for people who are recruiting in a virtual sense where you're never going to meet that person in person, just assume that, then it's about really tuning in, really listening, and not just, not just relying on the physical. What do you think?
No, I completely see what you're saying. We're removing that body language from the conversation. Everything becomes tone. Everything becomes the words that we actually say. And you have to pay attention. We all know the age-old saying, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And you've got to remember that if you're bringing people in to work in a call center, or to work on, I'm not just saying call centers, but contact centers like eChat or any other kind of touch point or channel that you use to communicate with your customers, you have to pick up on the detail. Because if you're not there, if you're not watching them before they eventually go through training and go live out there in the real world environment, you don't know what you're putting out there. You don't know who this person is to actually deal with your customer base or your client base or your prospects, whoever they're reaching out to. And I think it's so important that they have the right tone and they have the right personality that comes across. But you do have to focus in a hell of a lot more. It's about being there. It's about paying attention. We talk about active listening and passive listening and training and hearing and not seeing. But I think in this, it's crucial, especially in this environment. But I think the more and more Zoom conversations that happen, Skype conversations, FaceTime, WhatsApp, we're all kind of getting attuned to it now because I think we're spending more and more time in a digital world. So maybe people are picking up on it more. But I think especially in the recruitment stage, it's something you have to pay attention to. Because if you don't, or you miss the smallest little detail, that's going to have a knock-on effect. And you've got to remember, as they go through training, you need to empower your trainers who are also training virtually to look for these traits as well, to pay attention to everything they have going virtually, because otherwise you are going to open up the door for a world of pain, of something you're going to require quite quickly if you don't put a fix to it.
Yeah, and one of the things that is super important is to pay attention to everything. And this is usually beyond what somebody who's doing recruiting wants to do or wants to deal with. But for me, the biggest thing I have learned in life is that people are always the same versions of themselves. Now, there might be the slightly polished version, which I know isn't a word, in the interview process when someone's trying to impress, just like when somebody's going on a first date or trying to date somebody new, they're going to show the best version of themselves, right? Like they're going to clean up, going to put on pants, but now it's Zoom, so who knows what's going on. You guys have no idea what I'm wearing underneath down below. So, there's that. You've got to look at it through the lens of, yes, they're showing you their best behavior. But if you peel away some of that, and obviously there's a nervousness, the nervousness can kick somebody over to the wrong side where it seems something's off. The key is people are always themselves. People are whoever they are in every scenario. That's them. They can't escape it. It's who they are. And the key is to look for all those things. Were they late for the appointment? Were they early? Did they follow up after? Did they confirm beforehand? Like, depending on who you're looking for and what you're looking for your call center, for your sales team, you want to pick up on all those cues, because I promise that I promise that I promise, however they went through the process in the recruiting and also in the training, but even before you hire them, the recruiting is the same way they're going to approach their job and their pipeline and their sales conversations and their appointments.
Yeah, no, I back that up 110%, and that will ring bells or allow you to sit there and go, do you know what? We hired the right person when you know what process you're following. And I think when it comes to something like this in the virtual environment, and Jason, you said it best the other day, is we need to replicate that in-person experience over Zoom, face-to-face, digital, however it may come across, because if you can replicate it as much as possible, using a camera, using a microphone, rather than sitting there and looking at their body language, are they twitching their thumbs, are they sat there, are they fidgeting, pick up on the detail, see it as best as possible, and be as open and honest as possible. I think that's the only way you're going to win in that environment.
Yeah, and I will say too, I think one of the interesting things is that if you go virtual with your recruiting, right, where most of us don't have a choice right now, if you go phone only with your recruiting, what happens is it's kind of like when you can't see, then your other senses kind of get more attuned. When you can't see what somebody's doing, that could go good or bad. It could work for them or against them or you, but it removes that distraction. And then if you're really good at it, you could just listen, and then you can hear for what you want. Are they asking questions? Are they not asking questions? Are their answers short, or are they using 500 words to say something they could have said in 10 words, which will, I promise you, drive you crazy as a sales manager and probably undo most of their selling effectiveness, because they don't know how to do short answers. When you're not distracted with body language, or see somebody and you're like, oh, this is great, they're so confident in the room, that you aren't listening to everything, that's where it's important. I think the virtual stuff is actually more beneficial, because you're hearing for what you want to hear for.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, you're going to pick up on that tone. You're going to pick up on the personality, especially when they're in that environment. And that's what they're going to be doing. As you say, however they're contacting or reaching out to their customers, clients, contact, Zoom, phone, face-to-face, whatever it be, you're going to actually see that other type of personality come out. Because when you do recruitment face-to-face, and you do role plays and scenarios like that, everybody puts on their phone voice, everybody changes their environment. I mean, role plays are always a win-win scenario, unless you get thrown a curveball by somebody. I mean, I hate role playing, but they're now part and parcel in any call center. I remember the first call center job I went to, they're like, right, you're going to do a role play. I was like, gulp. I was like, I have no idea. And they gave me a product sheet and went, right, okay, here's your product. This is what you're talking about. I'm like, I have no training. I don't know what I'm going to do. But the thing is, it's what are you looking out for? And I remember back in the day, I said, so even though I don't know the product in detail and you've given me this cheat sheet, So I know in my own head, although I was kind of asking from a cheating perspective, I was like, what are you going to be looking for? And they wanted to listen to personality, tonality, how clear I was. Did I use inflection, pitch, pace? All of those different things play a massive important part. And again, and whether that's face-to-face or virtual, that will always continue to play a part in every single contact center. And if you don't do role plays for that reason, I recommend you do them just to, even put people on edge and make them feel a bit nervous because, when they're nervous, they sometimes do some of their best work.
Yeah. And again, this goes back to recruiting for what you're looking for, understanding who works best, understanding what kind of traits you want, right? We touched on it. You asked me early on, and I said openness, right? But there's also persistence and creativity and that confidence and various traits like that could be important to you based on what you're looking for. And then being able to put someone in those scenarios where you see what they can do. That's why I am not a big fan of the standard recruiting questions, interview questions that everyone is just trained to prepare for. Tell me about your greatest strength. Tell me about your greatest weakness. Tell me about a time when you lost a sale and what happened. Like, tell me about when the customer said no and like, how did you overcome that? Because these people are preparing for that, right? People know, like if you spend any time, you're going to study and prepare for that. So I don't ask any of those. And I've had some people be like, don't you want to know like no, I don't care what you prepared. I want to know you, and I want to catch you as authentic and off guard as I can, because that's what you're going to have to deal with in your sales process, is to be authentic and just, think of on the stuff on the fly. And that's going to tell me who you are, not the canned answers.
No, I think you're right there. And those times, don't get me wrong. And for anybody kind of thinking, should I remove those questions? No, I'm not. Jason, I'm not saying remove those questions. I think it's good to ask them, but maybe at a later stage when they come into training for the first time and they've got through the door, you can ask those questions because although they're prepared for them, they're actually now going to be honest so that you can work towards how to make them better and how to make them improve. But I love the fact you keep them off guard because they will open up. They will be different. You'll hear the stutters and the stammers as they go, I need to answer something differently. Because as you say, if you go to 10 sales interviews, which people do, and people job hop, especially in the call center world, it's such a small industry. It is unbelievable how small of a world the call center world is. You learn exactly those questions you're going to be asked. And you'll go, okay, well, I was asked them at contact center 1, 2, and 3. So I now know exactly what I do. So when I go in there, I'm going to sound super confident and bang, knock them off their feet. That's one of the biggest things. And I couldn't agree with you more there, Jason. But also be wary, guys. I know I just said it a second ago. The call center world is small. Everybody knows everybody. It's important to never burn bridges. It's important to stay friendly with everybody and do your utmost job, because if you burn bridges in one company, that recruitment stage, when you go to company number 2, number 3, number 4, they will find out about it. They'll know you worked for company X. Why did you leave? It's one of those things.
Yeah, that's always something to be careful of. And when you've seen enough of those people hopping around when you're in a company, right? So let's say you're in company C and people are going from A to B and then looking to come to C, and it hasn't worked out in the past, then you're going to be hesitant to hire those people again. Be like, well, if they didn't make it there, or if they left there, I don't want them. Or, I've seen in some situations where they worked at another company before and it wasn't a great company that didn't really teach people the right ways to do things. And a lot of times they would just bring bad habits. Again, going back to that openness side, and just don't want that. So you just want to be careful. And to people listening who may be looking for sales jobs, if you understand that, or if you're aware that might be a possibility, you always want to make sure you're very clear in the interview process of why you left or what differentiates you and what you're bringing to the table. That's going to be valuable. Remember, it's a business, right? The business wants you to be successful if you're a candidate and you're going to get hired there. So you want to show that you're not going to be a part of that terrible ass turnover that's going to happen.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's important, where, you set the right tone working for the right company. from day one.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn, if you want to improve, and you'll learn which call centers to go to are beneficial to you, or, who are going to help you grow, who are going to help you improve. And these are the ones when you go to that recruitment day, when you go to apply for that job in that contact center, because you're going to get some excellent benefits, you're going to learn, you're going to have career growth. Then these are the ones where you really need to outshine yourself. Because also remember, as a candidate, you are one of many candidates going through there, and you have to shine. Jason said it right. You're not only are the company trying to sell you on the company, you've got to sell the company on you. That is your first date. That is your win. That is your dinner. And I think it's so important that when you go in there, you are as prepared as possible, and not scripted to know those answers that they're going to get thrown at you. It's always beneficial to have them, but at the same time, be prepared to go outside of the box, outside of your comfort zone, because that's how you are going to make a difference. And if you want to work for a specific company, because I've worked for contact centers, there's some of the perks are off the chart, where people are itching to work at that call center, because they get this, they get that, they get to travel, they get to go on planes, they get to go see things, go to places they never would have dreamed of before. So people really want to get in there. And all of a sudden, when you go and interview, you've got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 100 people sat there also interviewing for the same job that 10 of you are going for. And sometimes these aren't the call centers that are selling you the dream where you earn 100 grand in 10 minutes. These are the ones that have genuine relationships with their team and are a pleasure to work with. And I've worked with so many contact centers in the past that are amazing towards their staff and give so many perks and so many tools. And that's not to say that companies that don't have the ability to do that do the same thing. The culture is different, the environment's different, and there are so many things to look out for when you are an employee going to these roles.
Yeah. Love it. Such good advice. I have never gone after a job at a company like you're talking about. So hit me up offline. I want to know who those companies are, because that sounds super fun. Since we've spent most of this time today on recruiting, we're going to talk about onboarding, which is that process of like, now I've hired you. Now, how do we make sure this is a successful transition, right? Like, I got on a first date. How do I move this towards the marriage stage effectively so that everyone's going to win? We'll have to save that for next time, because as I projected, we would get into recruiting with some topics from people tuning in, and then just focus on this. This is a huge topic. We could keep talking about this. But one question I have for you before we finish today is, what have you found as some good tips or advice regarding testing? So you're going through your recruiting process. You want to have somebody, you want to determine more objectively than subjectively if somebody's going to be a good candidate. Where have you seen testing come in? What kind of testing do you recommend?
So many people use different, theories, methodology, testing, exams, environments. But again, it all depends on the company you are and the type of people you want to bring in. You mentioned earlier on DISC, Myers-Briggs. We can go into other tests such as grit testing. We can go into so many online personality profile testings. And the thing is, do people overkill it? Do people bring the wrong test into the wrong place? Honestly, I think that's a study that I'd love to discuss at some point, and maybe we can add testing to our subject matter. And I think it's a really great question, because there are so many people out there probably listening today thinking, well, I do this and I do this and I do that. Look, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna put it out there to every single person out there. When you've heard this and when you've listened to this episode, message us, both Jason or I, or a group, or both of us, and let us know what tests you do in your company. Because this is something that so many people want to understand and so many people want to use. Now, some of the best companies I've worked for don't actually do personality testing. They like to kind of sit down and kind of understand the people through that kind of stage process, first stage, group stage, second stage, whatever it might be. As they go through to management and leadership, there was one company I worked for many years ago that used, and I'm not going to bring up any names. Again, if you want to talk to me separately, we can do, because, we're not at that sponsorship moment yet,
Not yet.
But there was a company that was based out of the US, that is one guy that created this company that used a baseline for a lot of testing. And he builds personality profiles based on a series of questions. And when I took this back in 2013, I believe it was, I read the output of this profile and I could not believe how accurate it was. It was off the chain, about what motivates me, how I do this, how I go about this scenario, when I'm put under pressure, when do I procrastinate versus when do I really go into detail. It was so detailed. It was unbelievable. And it made me look at it and go, wow, okay, maybe I need to review this and look at this separately and kind of think, well, how can I change that? And there are so many companies and tests where you could take today and next week you take it again and it's different. This stuck with me. And at the same time, they also have an online portal. Whereas if you're a manager, this was the great thing about this tool. If you are a manager and then all of a sudden your team do their tests get loaded into your profile. So it can actually show you how you can interact with their different personality profiles, what you can do differently, how you can influence them. It was insane. But again, that's an offline topic. That's something we can talk about. In regards to testing for me, there are so many out there. I think that is a discussion for another day. There are so many things you can do, but bear in mind, if you are bringing people in to do web chat or e-chat, make sure you do written competency typing tests. That is something I've seen where they brought people in to do e-chat and they've not even seen how many letters or how many words can they actually spell. Now, again, we have autocorrect and so many tools at our disposal nowadays. We can figure that out. But, we have people that, can't type, but they're put into an e-chat role. We have telephony tests where they go into different environments. So again, there are things like that we need to talk about, but I'd love to pick that up on another day and another discussion, Jason. But there are so many ways that we can use this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's competency and skill related. So typing, technology usage, do they know how to use a spreadsheet? Can they open a new Word document? Can they edit things? Right? There's that kind of stuff. And then there's the personality behavior things like you're talking about, like procrastinating, what happens when somebody's under stress. For me, the real quick thing as we wrap up here, the one big suggestion I have is pick one and stick with that one, and then just have this one that you use. Because to me, there's no right or wrong one. There's no better one or worse one. But if you use one and then you test your current staff and then you look at who's successful on your team based on the metrics, and then you look at that result, and then that's what you test for, you will always have an apples to apples comparison. So it's not about DISC being better than Myers-Briggs. It's about having a standardized thing and then just always looking for this one category that you feel is the best way to go. And then it literally doesn't matter. Whatever the platform is, in my opinion, doesn't matter as long as you're just doing the same comparison. Now, next week, you're like, oh, let's try Myers-Briggs. You'll never win. Just nope. Stop. Right. So it's about that consistency, which I think is key. So, I think this has been super fun. I didn't mention it earlier because we were on a roll, but Joshua Pather put a comment in here. Really insightful guys. Also, my buddy Hugh Lydell from your sales wizard, Red Hat Consulting, was on his podcast. He's an awesome guy. So he said hello earlier as well. Thank you, everyone who commented. We are back now, Wednesdays, all kinds of different times. So 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UK GMT type time zone. And please submit it. We've got all kinds of stuff. Tell everybody what we have now going on. So we have a business page. There's an Instagram.
We got an Instagram with 0 followers at the moment. It's only just been set up. We're currently designing the logo. We're in the process of building a website so that eventually we can move our broadcasting to the website, and we can move all our channels through to specifically the LinkedIn page as well. We'd love to get our broadcast out on the LinkedIn page, but we need a ton more followers. So please, if you're out there and you're listening, please share this broadcast. Please share our business page with as many people as possible so that we can actually get some LinkedIn Live on that specific page. page and start to build a following on the Call Center Confidence with Catt and Catt LinkedIn page, especially our website as well. Drive some traffic through there. But again, all of this is in progress. We're building it now. It's going to be a game changer. And like we said, this is all free content. There's no call to action. We don't want you guys to buy anything from us. We are here to help you become a call center hero, whether it be frontline sales, recruitment, training to come. But I think we've still got a ton of topics. I'm looking at our list to go through the recruitment process next week. So we'll stick around with recruitment. It looks like we're doing 2 episodes on a topic. So we'll be back this time next week, continuing on with the recruitment, but looking at the process, looking at feedback. We'll pick up more of that testing. So please don't forget to message us, how we advertise. And of course, one of the big questions is recommend a friend. Does it actually work? I don't know. You tell me. But loads of things to talk about. It's been an absolute pleasure, but I'm looking forward to next week. Aren't you, Jason?
I am as well, Oliver. Thank you for being amazing and being fun to chat with while we go through this. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and we will catch you all next week. And you can find us, as always, on LinkedIn. You can find all of our social media there. It's really easy. Chat with us. Send us your comments, your ideas, questions, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks for stopping by.